Jack Harper adjusted the strap of his worn backpack as he stood at the edge of the overgrown driveway leading to Warden Manor. The house had been abandoned for decades, yet it loomed like a sentinel over the surrounding forest, its broken windows staring blankly as if watching his every move. Rain fell in thin sheets, bouncing off the cracked pavement and mixing with the mud at his boots. He flicked on his flashlight, its beam cutting through the thick mist that clung to the trees, revealing twisted branches and the skeletal remains of what had once been a beautiful garden. Every step he took toward the entrance echoed unnaturally, amplified by the hollow corridors beyond the front doors. The air was thick with the scent of decayed wood rotting, damp earth, and something sharper, metallic, that hinted at the building's darker history. His pulse quickened, a mixture of excitement and annoying unease crawling up his spine. Every explorer knew the stories, whispered in town for generations, a family cursed, servants who disappeared without trace, and strange noises that were said to haunt the halls at night. Jack paused at the massive oak doors, running his hand over the cracked carvings of twisted faces and grotesque figures. The rain splattered against the wood as if warning him to turn back, but he stepped inside anyway. The door creaked loudly, swinging open to reveal a grand entry hall that had once been opulent. Dust hung in the air like a fog, and floorboards groaned under his weight. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the walls, shifting with the faint flicker of his flashlight. Somewhere deep in the house, a soft, almost imperceptible piano note resonated, though no piano had been played in decades, making him stop in his tracks and strain to listen, heart hammering against his ribs. As Jack moved deeper into Warden Manor, the atmosphere grew heavier, almost suffocating. The shadows clung to the corners of the hallways, stretching and twisting in ways that made him question reality. With each step, the floorboards groaned under his weight, echoing through the cavernous rooms like a warning. The air was thick with the metallic tang of blood, and faint, dark stains smeared the walls and floorboards, some fresh and glistening as if they had been left only moments ago. He caught glimpses of shapes in the corners of his eyes, figures that melded into the darkness whenever he tried to focus on them. A sudden gust of wind swept through the broken windows, rattling shutters and sending loose debris skittering across the floor. It carried whispers, low and fragmented, as though the manor itself was speaking directly into his mind. The voices were indistinct, overlapping, and repeating in patterns that made it impossible to tell where one ended and another began. Jack's flashlight flickered violently, leaving him in near total darkness for a heartbeat, and when it came back, the shadows seemed closer, more solid, as if they had shifted toward him while he couldn't see. Bloodstains formed twisted patterns across the walls, some resembling hands pressed against the plaster, others distorted faces frozen in silent screams. The sense of being watched intensified. Every shadow seemed to harbor something alive, waiting for the right moment to strike. His own reflection appeared in shards of broken glass, eyes wide and pale, but behind them, he thought he saw shapes moving independently, shadows not cast by any human form. The oppressive darkness pressed in from all sides, the sounds of dripping water and distant scraping echoing through the empty halls, punctuated by an occasional, fleeting rustle of something large and unnatural moving just beyond the reach of the light. Jack's eyes caught a faint glimmer at the far end of the hall, partially hidden behind toppled bookshelves and broken furniture. Curiosity pushed him forward, though every instinct screamed to stop. As he approached, he noticed a narrow doorway partially concealed behind an old tapestry, its edges frayed and soaked with age. Pushing the fabric aside, he discovered a hidden room, its air thick and stagnant, carrying the unmistakable stench of iron. The walls were covered with symbols etched deep into the plaster, some of them smeared with what appeared to be dried blood. The flicker of his flashlight caused the markings to shift and warp in his vision as if they were alive, writhing just out of reach. In the center of the room sat a pedestal, and atop it lay a leather-bound diary. The cover was slick with a dark substance sticky under his fingers, yet he couldn't tell if it was old or freshly deposited. As he opened it, the pages were warped and brittle. The ink faded in parts, but the words on the final entry were written with striking clarity, as though someone or something had inscribed them only yesterday. The text spoke of the manor, demanding a sacrifice, of shadows that roamed freely beneath the stairs, and of anyone foolish enough to enter becoming part of the house itself. The room seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Shadows elongated and leaned toward him, and the temperature dropped sharply, frosting his breath into the dim light. From somewhere deep below, a low scraping sound echoed like fingernails dragging along the stone floor. Jack swallowed hard, the hairs on his arms standing on end as he realized the diary was not just a warning, it was a record of every victim who had entered the hidden room before him, their fate sealed and their terror immortalized. As he read, the room seemed to tighten around him, walls pressing closer, shadows stretching to meet him, and the very air vibrating with whispers that urged him to leave. Though some deeper, darker curiosity held him rooted in place. Jack's heart pounded as the shadows in the hidden room began to shift, taking on shapes that were almost human but grotesquely wrong. The dim light from his flashlight revealed fragments of faces, twisted mouths frozen in silent screams, and hands that seemed to twitch and stretch unnaturally from the walls. At first, he thought it was a trick of his mind, the result of exhaustion and fear. But the shadows moved independently, detaching from the walls and pooling toward him like dark, viscosity heaped up. Every instinct in his body screamed that these were not merely shadows, but something far older, hungrier, and more malevolent. One of the forms emerged fully into the beam of his flashlight, a horrifying silhouette stitched together from patches of flesh and bone. Its head swiveled in impossible angles, and its glowing eyes locked onto him with a predatory intelligence. The stench of decay hit him all at once, a sickly mixture of iron, rot, and smoke, making him gag. It didn't move like a human. It slithered and lurched, dragging fragments of the floorboards and leaving streaks of blackened blood in its wake. The whispering intensified, voices overlapping in a discordant symphony of warnings and taunts, echoing from every corner of the room and from nowhere at all. Jack stumbled backward, barely catching himself on the pedestal as another shadow reached toward him, its hands stretching impossibly long and thin. Every movement he made seemed to slow the air thickening, like the house itself was restraining him. The walls pulsed with a rhythm, almost like a heartbeat, as if the entire manor were alive and feeding off his fear. On the floor, blood ran in small streams from cracks in the wood, pooling and forming shape spaces, screaming mouths, clawed hands that seemed to writhe under his gaze. A low, guttural sound rose from the corners of the room, vibrating through the floor and into his chest. It was accompanied by a sudden rush of cold air, knocking his flashlight to the floor. The shadows reacted instantly, coiling around the fallen light and swallowing it whole, plunging the room into near total darkness. Jack could hear them moving closer, the scraping of claws and wet, slapping sounds echoing through the chamber. Every breath he took felt stolen, every heartbeat amplified in the deafening silence between the whispers. The floor beneath him seemed to shift slightly, as if the house itself were reshaping the space to trap him further, to make escape impossible. Jack's panic escalated as the shadows continued their relentless advance, coiling and stretching across the floor like living tendrils of darkness. The walls themselves seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting as though the manor were drawing him deeper into its grasp. The air was thick with the coppery scent of blood, and every drop that hit the floor sent faint ripples through the dark puddles, forming shapes that resembled twisted faces, screaming silently. His flashlight flickered violently, casting grotesque patterns on the ceiling and walls. And in that wavering light, he could see shadows detaching completely from their sources, slithering toward him with impossible speed. A sudden crash from behind made him spin, revealing one of the assembled Horza figures stitched together from the limbs and torsos of multiple victims. Its eyes glowed like molten coals, and its jagged teeth gleamed as it opened its mouth in a silent, blood-curdling scream. Jack tried to move, but the floorboards beneath him creaked and split, sending thin rivulets of fresh blood spilling across his boots. Every step he took seemed to trigger a chorus of whispers, some taunting, some pleading, all in voices that were unnervingly human, yet distorted, warped, and soaked in malice. The shadows reacted to his fear, stretching taller, moving faster, their forms flickering between human and monstrosity. One slammed into the pedestal with the diary, sending it skidding across the room, pages fluttering open to reveal entries, written in crimson ink that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Each name inscribed was a victim, every word soaked in terror, the ink still wet with something that smelled unmistakably like blood. The ceiling above began to leak a dark, sticky substance, and Jack realized with horror that it was not water, it was coagulated blood, dripping in slow, deliberate drops that splattered across the floor with grotesque precision. The room seemed to close in around him, walls bending slightly as if alive, shadows forming grotesque hands that reached toward his throat. The sound of dragging, scraping, and muffled cries filled his ears from all directions, echoing through the manor like a twisted symphony. Jack's breath came in ragged gasps, and his vision blurred from the mixture of sweat, fear, and the dim flickering light reflecting off the wet, bloodied surfaces. Every instinct screamed to run, but the manor was already inside him, suffocating, binding him to its endless cycle of horror.
Please like and subscribe channel Fear Frequency for more horror stories. Thank you.